Olá, pessoal, boa tarde, bem-vindos ao Metabolic Podcast. Meu nome é Janaína Koenen, sou médica endocrinologista e hoje eu tenho a honra de entrevistar o Dr. Tom O'Brien, especialista em estudos sobre glúten, sobre doença celíaca, intolerância não celíaca ao glúten, alergia ao glúten e estratégias nutricionais na retirada do glúten, né? Como fazer uma estratégia nutricional para doenças autoimunes. Ele é autor do livro The Immune Fix, né? Como curar doenças autoimunes, está traduzido para o português. Na minha bio, no meu Instagram, vocês conseguem dar um link lá ou na parte de doenças autoimunes tem o livro dele. Então, agora a entrevista vai ser em inglês, obviamente. Depois o YouTube vai colocar as legendas. Mas quem tiver um inglês bom aí, convido vocês a ficarem. Quem tiver perguntas, eu vou. E é ao vivo, então vocês podem perguntar que eu vou transmitir ao Dr. O'Brien, ok? So, welcome, Dr. O'Brien. I'm so glad you're here. I was telling them that I'm so happy that you're a reference in everything that matters regarding gluten intolerance and celiac disease and what happens when you ingest gluten. And I hope we manage to talk all about it. So first of all, welcome. And I'd like you to introduce yourself and talk to people because you're very famous, but maybe someone here doesn't know you. I don't know. They live in a different world, but so introduce yourself, please. Não tô ouvindo o que ele tá falando. I'm not listening to you. Wait. Your audio is not coming? Wait. Yeah. Okay? Speak. Say something. No. I can't hear you. Did you change anything?
Not that I know of, no.
Yes. Now we're here.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go.
Okay, let's go. I opened my practice on Valentine's Day in 1980. And, well, I'll go back to when I was an intern and my wife and I could not get pregnant. I called the 7 most famous holistic doctors I'd ever heard of, and I asked them, what do you do for infertility? They all told me what they would do, and I was making notes quickly as they were talking. I put a program together, and we were pregnant in 6 weeks.
Wow.
We lived in married housing on campus in Chicago, and our neighbors who had gone through artificial insemination and nothing had worked asked if I'd work with them. And I said, well, I don't think it'll harm you. Sure. They were pregnant in 3 months. And so now we are 4 months pregnant, and we're so happy and grateful. And we're telling all of our friends in Chicago, and our friend's sister, who lived in Wisconsin, 4 hours away, called and said, can I come talk to you, please? And I said, okay. And she'd come down, and she'd had 2 miscarriages, and no one could tell her why. So I started working with her, and she got pregnant, and she had a healthy delivery. So now I'm opening my practice, ready to tell the world how to have healthy pregnancies. And there's not much in medicine that's all or every, but this was every couple who had hormone-related problems, every single couple had as a contributor to their problems, they were eating foods they did not know were causing inflammation in their body and were contributing to the problems they were having. Every person. It didn't matter if it was polycystic ovaries or premature ejaculation or recurrent miscarriages or infertility. Every single couple were eating foods they did not know were a problem because they did not feel bad when they ate the food. We think when we eat something, if we don't feel bad, it's not a problem. But the science tells us the ratio is 8 to 1. For every 1 person that eats a food that gives them gut problems, there are 8 people that do not have gut problems, but it activates their immune system and they have thyroid problems, or they have brain problems, or they have ovarian problems. They don't have gut problems. So they eat the food and they think it's okay. It's not the case. And so I started my practice over 40 years ago, realizing how important food selection is when you're dealing with a health issue. And the most common food, by far the most common food that was activating the immune system, whether you felt bad or not, is wheat and gluten. It's the most common food. Now we have tests that are very accurate, and it's extremely rare to find someone whose immune system is not creating inflammation fighting wheat. Almost everyone, if you do the right tests, you identify wheat is a problem for that person.
Sometimes people don't realize, right? They have some issues
right.
that they say, oh, this is completely unrelated. That they have psoriasis, and then they have asthma, and then they have some migraines. Sometimes they say, no, I'm so unlucky that I have all these things, all these issues. And they don't realize that maybe there's one thing causing them all, right?
Yes. It's very, very common. That's because they think if they don't feel bad in their gut when they eat the food, it's okay for them. You have to remember the 8-to-1 ratio.
And what does the science say, about this? Because we hear people saying that there's no evidence whatsoever as how could wheat, the food, like the grain, cause anything in human beings. So I read the science, you read the science, you wrote about it, but some people don't know. So maybe you could explain to them.
Yes, of course. And unfortunately, those people that say there is no science, they just haven't looked. And we have a term in English for people like that. They have their head in dark places. They do not look. So there's hundreds and hundreds of studies. So let me show you a few slides.
Okay, so we're going to show some slides. It's great.
Yeah, this is very true. Medical science has made such tremendous progress. There's hardly a healthy human left today. Next slide, please.
Pode passar, Thiago. O próximo aí. Yeah. Tem que diminuir a carinha.
So it's often stated that the average is 17 years from the time the science is published before it makes it into clinical practice. Next slide, please.
Próximo, Thiago.
And this is why it takes, on average, 17 years. You have to do the clinical, the human research. First, it's the basic research with animals, and then the human research, and then the clinical research. And then our organizations have to make guidelines, and then it makes it to clinical practice. This is the average, not the exception. Next slide, please. So, unfortunately, when people have rigid thinking, whatever their thinking is, they don't change their thinking. We know that when a new truth comes out, it doesn't convince the opponents. Rather, the opponents eventually die, and the new generation of doctors think the new truth. It's unfortunate, but that's very common. Next slide, please. Once a belief is established, people will seek out information that supports what they believe. If they're confronted with mixed evidence, people give greater weight to information that supports their point of view while discounting the new science.
So this is what people are doing, right? They're in dark places.
That's right.
They just don't look.
That's right. Their heads are in dark places. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is Professor Alessio Fasano, Professor of Pediatrics at Harvard Medical School, Professor of Nutrition, Harvard School of Public Health, the Chief of Pediatric Gastroenterology at Mass General, Harvard, the Director of Mucosal Immunology, Harvard, the Director of the Center for Celiac Research, Harvard. 5 titles. He has 5 titles.
Only
Any
5.
one title is a lifelong dream for someone who is at the top of their game. He has 5. We think he's going to win the Nobel Prize. We do. Because it was him and his team that identified in 1997 the mechanism by which leaky gut occurs. They identified the mechanism 25 years ago, and they've been publishing about it for 25 years. Now, if you can see the title of this article, Fasano is always very careful of what he says so that he's not misquoted. Very, very careful. And he has over 300 papers published now, maybe more. And there'll be 7 authors on a research paper, and the last name, Alessio Fasano. He put his stamp of approval on the article. This paper he wrote himself. So you know how important this is. All disease begins in the leaky gut. The role of the protein zonulin in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. Next slide, please. And he tells us that the 2 most powerful triggers in activating leaky gut, the 2 most powerful triggers are lipopolysaccharides, LPS, and gluten. This is coming from Harvard. This is what they're teaching the gastroenterologists right now. Next slide, please. Gluten is misinterpreted by the zonulin pathway as a harmful component of a bug. Now, what does that mean? We have the same body as our ancestors 10,000 years ago. The same kidneys, the same gallbladder, the same immune system, the same digestive system. And our ancestors, before agriculture, they were nomads. They walked and they followed the herds. They were always following the animals to find food. So their number one concern was finding food. So they would find something, they pick it up. First they sniff it, then they nibble at it, then they eat it. If there was bad bacteria, bugs on the food, and they didn't identify and they ate it, everything, every morsel that comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, every morsel is examined by toll-like receptors. I think of them as the soldiers at Buckingham Palace in London. You know, those soldiers with the big hats? They're very stiff, they're dormant, they don't do anything. But don't mess with those guys. Do not. That's toll-like receptors. Toll-like receptors are very dormant. But if they see a bug, immediately they do 2 things. They activate the production of zonulin, which opens up the tight junctions. Water comes into the intestines to wash the bug out with the bowel movement. That's the first thing. The second thing, they activate the main amplifier of inflammation, NF-kappa B. And all of this happens within 5 minutes. And gluten is misinterpreted by toll-like receptors as a harmful component of a bug. Gluten has these peptides of poorly digested gluten have the amino acid structure of the outer surface of a bug. And so you have toll-like receptors examining all of the food coming out of the stomach. And if they see the protein structure of a bug, they activate this defensive mechanism. And Maureen Leonard, very famous gastroenterologist, also at Harvard, she did a literature review of over 60 studies on this topic. And she published it in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And she said, gluten is misinterpreted as a harmful component of a microorganism, this occurs in all humans who consume gluten. So anyone who is listening to this, if you are human, now sometimes your wife may not think you're human. If you
Caio, peraí, wait. Something happened. O som. Your sound. Something happened. Speak.
speak.
Yeah, okay.
This is happening
Sorry.
to you in every human, without exception. But the ratio is 8-1. Most people don't feel it in their gut. They feel it in the symptoms in their brain, or in their kidneys, or in their skin, or in their joints. They don't feel it in their gut. It's the immune response, the NF-kappa B, the major amplifier of inflammation that causes the cascade effect throughout your body. So this is pure science. There are many, many articles on this. So anyone that has the audacity to say there's no science have their heads in dark places. We have no time for that kind of garbage anymore. Excuse me, but these are people's lives at stake. We can't have experts out there saying, excuse me, stupid stuff like that. Excuse me. But I have no tolerance for those kinds of comments anymore.
And they're very frequent, It's like they said we are nutritional terrorists because it's a very, very bad diet because everyone likes their little bread. So
yes.
When I tell people stop eating wheat, because give it a try, right? 30 days. It might take longer, but in 30 days, you already feel something different. If you don't, okay,
you already
I'm wrong.
will notice something different, yes.
If you don't feel anything, okay, you can go back to eating your trash.
Let me give you another expert. Next slide, please.
Passei de novo.
Next slide, one more.
Yeah, that's great. Mais
Next slide.
Yeah. Hey.
This is Professor Yehuda Schoenfeld. Schoenfeld is the godfather of autoimmunity. You can see all of his credentials there. Perhaps the greatest honor is that 26 of the PhDs who received their PhD in immunology from Tel Aviv University, from his department, they now chair departments of immunology in medical schools and hospitals around the world. They're his students. This is the godfather. Next slide, please. So Schoenfeld published this paper 2 years ago. Look at the title of the paper. Gluten-free diet can ameliorate the symptoms of non-celiac autoimmune diseases. And he says, despite the multifaceted nutritional value of gluten containing grains, gluten is not essential in the diet and its biological value is not considered high. Next slide, please. He looked at 83 articles. Next slide, please. And the age of the patients from 9 months to 69 years old. And how long had they been on the gluten-free diet? From 1 month to 9 years. Next slide, please. And what they found was that reduction in the symptoms of autoimmune diseases after going on a gluten-free diet occurred in 65% of the patients, and this was confirmed in 79% of the studies. Not every study, not every time, but the majority of time, by far the majority. Next slide, please. And the most common autoimmune diseases that got better, psoriasis, Hashimoto's thyroid disease, inflammatory bowel disease. Next slide, please. Autoimmune thyroid disease was the most responsive. 87% of the people, non-celiac, got better on a gluten-free diet. Their antibodies go down on a gluten-free diet. Next slide, please. This is from the godfather of autoimmunity, and you cannot see in this slide what his drawing is. Next slide, please. Here are all of the autoimmune diseases that got better on a gluten-free diet. Just read that.
Just read.
Non-celiac. I gave this presentation. These slides are from a presentation I gave in Ireland 2 days ago. And it was to cardiologists. Because on the top right, you see idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy, recurrent pericarditis, autoimmune myocarditis. They all get better on a gluten-free diet. And this is from the godfather of autoimmunity. This is not some small college in some small town. This is the godfather. Next slide, please. So the question is, what presenting complaint that a patient comes in with would you not check to see if wheat is causing the problem? When Fasano tells us that gluten and lipopolysaccharides are the two most common triggers of intestinal permeability, and the leaky gut is the gateway in the development of autoimmune diseases, who would you not check? You just have to check. You have to check thoroughly, but you just have to check. Next slide, please. I'm hoping that these slides will just have you thinking about it. And when you're driving down the road, you just start thinking about this. You say, oh, well, maybe it's worth checking. I certainly can check. If my doctor won't check for me, I'll find a new doctor. But you just want to check to see. Next slide, please. And I put this study in here for you because it's jaw-dropping. They looked at 86,000 children in Norway, and they followed the pregnant mothers and the children. Next slide, please. They looked to see how much gluten was the mother eating in the first 22 weeks of her pregnancy, and then how much gluten was the child eating in the first 18 months of their life. And they followed these children for 12 years after that. Next slide, please. There was a 46% increased risk of developing type 1 diabetes in the children for every 10 grams of gluten they were eating per day.
Wow.
46%. Next slide, please.
Dose response.
A normal Western diet has 13 to 15 grams of gluten a day. And for every 10 grams of gluten that the mother was eating in the first 22 weeks of her pregnancy, or the child in the first 18 months of his life, 46% increased risk of the autoimmune disease type 1 diabetes. Next slide, please. And what do we give to our children to eat?
I don't.
Yes, I don't either.
My son doesn't.
Yes.
Only occasionally.
Yes. Next slide, please. And this is what the author said after looking at 86,000 children. They said, our results show a higher intake of gluten by the child at an early age gives a higher risk of type 1 diabetes. How can you argue with this? That sometimes this is the fuel on the fire that causes the autoimmune disease. One more slide. Next slide, please. And people ask, what should we be eating in a gluten-free diet? This is what a gluten-free diet should be. Most important, what's on the bottom? Water. A lot of water. And gluten-free foods, They're on the very top, not too often at all, because gluten-free foods are not healthy for you. They're garbage. They're white paste. You do not substitute your wheat for gluten-free products. You change to include more fruits and vegetables and non-gluten grains. Okay, we can stop sharing the screen.
Pode tirar o slide. So this is from the Mediterranean diet, right? The pyramid, yeah.
Yes.
So you see, people. Don't you think, Dr. Tom, that people are most nowadays they're more worried about meat and than about sugar and about wheat?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Bad meats are a problem. When you eat meat of animals that were raised in captivity with antibiotics and hormones, they're not good meats. They have the wrong kind of fats in them. They're not good for you, and they can cause problems. But when you eat quality meat, grass-fed or wild meats or free-range chickens, they're not in these little cages. It's quality protein. Now, there is the occasional person that just doesn't do well with high protein diets or with meats in general. There is the occasional person, but the vast majority of people do really well with quality protein in their diet.
You know what? I was giving a lecture 2 weeks ago. I was recording for a postgrad course. And I was talking about change in the diet and mental diseases. And I was amused. I saw some papers, some really good ones, like randomized clinical trials with children with autism, in which when you do a casein and gluten-free diet on those children, they actually improve a lot in lots of parameters of autism.
Yes.
So this was amusing for me because everyone said there's no evidence whatsoever of anything, right? So I was reading about ketogenic diets for HDAD and autism. And actually I found, okay, for HDAD, it's not about a ketogenic diet that works. It's about allergens in foods and processed food stuff, you know, and casein and gluten. So I was like, my God. So there's a lot of evidence in children, randomized clinical trials, like double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, and no one's listening. And it's increasing. Like the CDC last year, I don't know, they said like the autism rates are rising, right?
Yes, quite high. Yeah, when I came into practice, autism was about one child in every 10,000. Now it's 1 in 36. Yeah, the brain is not developing in utero the way that it should to its full potential. So these babies are born now with brains that have not developed properly. I'll give you an example. Chicago, 2016, 346 pregnant women. They did urine tests and they measured phthalates, chemicals used to mold plastic. And they took the results and they put them into fourths, the lowest, the next, the third, and the highest. The amount of phthalates, these plasticizer chemicals, in the urine. They then followed the offspring of these pregnancies, and 7 years later, when the children turned 7 years old, they reached back out and said, hi, it's time to do the Wechsler IQ test, the official IQ test. Every child, and this is so rare that you don't find every, but this was every child whose mother was in the highest category of phthalates in urine in pregnancy compared to the children who were in the lowest quartile of phthalates in urine in pregnancy. Every child in the highest quartile, their IQ was 7 points lower than these children. 7 points. Now that doesn't mean anything to any. It was 6.7 to 7.4 points lower. It doesn't mean anything to anyone until you understand a 1 point difference in IQ is noticeable. A 7 point difference is the difference between a child working really hard, getting straight A's in school, and a child working really hard, getting straight C's. This child doesn't have a chance of ever excelling in school because their brains never develop properly. Now you just Google phthalates and neurogenesis. Here come the studies. The higher the phthalate level, the more inhibition of brain cell development. Okay, where do women get phthalates? Nail polish. Give me a 5-year-old girl that puts that nail polish on her 10 little fingers and 10 little toes once a week for 25 years. Now she's 30 years old and she gets pregnant.
Oh my God.
The phthalates in the nail polish are in your bloodstream in 4 minutes. When you store food in leftover plastic containers overnight in the refrigerator, the phthalates from the plastic container are in the food the next day. When you drink coffee from a plastic cup or with a plastic lid, the steam condenses on the underside of the lid, drips down into the coffee full of phthalates, bisphenol A. Then you put the coffee cup up to your lips, the hot liquid hits the lid, tapers down to the opening full of bisphenol A. So we're getting these phthalates and they accumulate in your body over the years. There's no evidence that the amount of phthalates in nail polish that get into your bloodstream is toxic to humans. There's no evidence. There's no evidence that the amount of phthalates from plastic storage containers that get into food is harmful to humans. There's no evidence. But this stuff accumulates over time in your body. Now you have a problem. And that's what's happening in our culture today. That is a big contributor to the increase in autism, is the amount of toxic chemicals women are accumulating in their body. The average now is over 180 different chemicals that women put on their skin before they leave the house in the morning. That's the average. And these chemicals
I only do it when I record podcasts. The other days I don't.
There you go. Yeah, and you use organic. You use organic nail polish, organic cosmetics, and you reduce the toxicity. But if you don't do that, you're poisoning yourself.
Yeah, people should think twice. And sometimes people think it's doing one thing. Like, okay, so I'm going to be gluten-free. And then they eat loads of sugar with rice flour. It's not about that, right? It's about eating real food. Yeah. And just coming a little bit back to gluten then. So there are a lot of diseases that can be related to the gluten ingestion in non-celiacs, right? And
yes.
How long, for example, what do you think, in your experience, how long does a person take to feel better withdrawing gluten from the diet? And it's so hard to take gluten out because everything has gluten, right? Like even makeup has gluten, everything has gluten on it. And all the sauces, like when you go to a restaurant, it's so hard. I know because I'm gluten intolerant. So, and even if you use those enzymes, enzymes that digest gluten, they're like a couple in market. They don't really work a lot if you eat lots of gluten. Only if there's traces, they kind of help, but then they don't really solve the problem. So how can we really be gluten-free? I mean,
it's very difficult at first. You have to learn a new way of thinking. How long does it take before you feel better? In my office, the rule is 3 weeks. I don't care if you've got stage 3 cancer. I don't care what you've got. If you aren't noticing that you're functioning better in 3 weeks, we miss something. It may take you 2 years before everything is stable, but you should notice fairly quickly because gluten is a problem. But if you also have a problem with dairy and you don't check for that and you keep eating dairy, you're still inflamed. You're not going to notice much benefit. So you have to be comprehensive. You have to do the right test to find out what is it in the lifestyle that's causing the inflammation that's manifesting in the symptoms you have now. Gluten is primary, as Fasano tells us. Gluten and LPS are the 2 most common causes creating intestinal permeability. But there are other foods also that people have sensitivity to. You just have to be, so after 3 weeks, if people are not better, I missed something. And we have to go back and check again. There's more.
There's a paper published recently. I got it last week. I mean, I don't know when it was published, about endometriosis and gluten sensitivity. I don't know if you have a chance of looking at it, but it's relating gluten ingestion to endometriosis and gluten withdrawal with improvements in inflammatory scores and pain. So I found it really interesting because I treat endometriosis with ketogenic diet and metabolic protocols and supplements, because endometriosis is like cancer. I think psoriasis is to skin cancer as endometriosis is to ovarian cancer. So they're similar in many ways, in pathways, metabolic pathways. So actually, I started working with this because I had adenomyosis. So I cured myself doing this, and I said, okay, I have to study more. And it's interesting because my patients, when they cheat the diet and they eat out and they eat gluten, their pain worsens. So before I wasn't sure if it was really gluten, but now I'm paying more attention after this paper. And actually, it's true. I mean, I'm realizing most of the patients that they cheat the diet with gluten, they feel worse than if they ate, I don't know, potatoes. And it's
Yeah, it's very common. You know, people just don't realize I can have a little once in a while. No, you can't. No, you can't. A single exposure will increase inflammation in the body anywhere from 2 to 4 months from a single exposure. So you can't cheat. You can't have a cheat day. You can't have a little once in a while, because your immune system is just trying to protect you because it thinks it's a bug. Your immune system thinks wheat is a harmful component of a bug, and it's going to do everything it can to protect you. It's just trying to save your life. And those ancestors who did not have good toll-like receptor function, they died. They did not reproduce. Those that had good toll-like receptor function reproduced. And so they pass on to their children the same genetics. And that's passed down now for 10,000 years to us. We have good functioning toll-like receptors. They're going to try to protect you no matter what. No matter what you think. I mean, you can meditate, you can bless the food, you're still going to activate toll-like receptor 4.
Do you have any case, like, that you remember you treated, like an interesting one, in which it was unexpected, like they had lots of diseases and the response was good after going in a gluten-free diet?
Recurrent miscarriages. Yeah, of course. Recurrent miscarriages. It's always a first thing to check, and we've had many cases over the years of couples who were unsuccessful in having healthy pregnancies. And it's not just a gluten-free diet, but that's primary, is the gluten-free diet. And we put them organic. No more glyphosate, no more chemicals, toxic chemicals. And the result is they have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy delivery.
Yes, glyphosate. So, in Brazil, we had this study 2 years ago, in which they tested all products with gluten, with wheat, flour in Brazil, in the market. The packaged ones, the breads, So they found cookies and everything, all products, all of them. It had like 26 products, the most famous ones for kids, for the kids eat at school and in their breakfasts, I don't know why. They had like at least 5 pesticides. So always glyphosate and glyphosate. And there was this cookie, they had like 8 pesticides. And what did the sanitary agency say? Okay, but they're in the limits. We don't test for products. We only test for the primary, for the grains when they go out. So we test for the grains. But they don't test the products after they're processed, right? So you take all the fiber, you refine the flour, then you make all these little breads, you give to your kids, and you have 8 pesticides. And I saw these papers about, so you're eating wheat, like gluten and glyphosate together, and then you put sugar on it. What could be worse than that for a pregnant woman to eat and a child?
There was a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that was shocking, just completely shocking. And the editors of the journal made a comment. They said, "This is an elegant study using sophisticated biomarkers to demonstrate their point." Now, the editors of the journal, the American Medical Association, don't say that very often. They don't give a stamp of approval like that. But they did for this study because it was so shocking. And this was from Harvard. And they looked at couples going to assisted fertility centers. And as you know, it's a very stressful time for couples. They're spending tens of thousands of dollars trying to get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy, to start a family. It's a beautiful thing. It's very, very stressful. And they ruled out all of the known factors that contribute to success or failure: smoking, alcohol consumption, exercise, no exercise, socioeconomic class, race. They ruled all of that out. And they looked at one thing and one thing only. How many servings of fruits and vegetables was the woman eating a day? The results were shocking. They put the total number of servings into fourths: the lowest, the next, the third, and the highest. And no one could believe when they first heard it. They had to read the study again, because those in the highest amount of servings of fruits and vegetables per day compared to those in the lowest amount of servings of fruits and vegetables per day, those in the highest amount had an 18% less likelihood of successful implantation. Less likelihood.
Because it wasn't organic?
And if they did get pregnant, they had a 26% less likelihood of a live birth. They had more miscarriages and more stillbirths. The more fruits and vegetables you eat, the worse the outcome. It was shocking. It was shocking. But there was a group of women in that study who were eating organic. And in that, very good, by the way, you caught it. In that category, the results were the exact opposite. The more fruits and vegetables you eat, the better. But because women are so accumulated with toxins now, more than ever in history, because young women, their mothers were toxic. They had accumulated lots of chemicals. From the 1960s on, there's been more and more chemicals, more chemicals, more chemicals, more chemicals. Women and men are so accumulated with these toxins that they don't associate with how they feel. And I believe the most sensitive tissue in the human body to inflammation, the most sensitive tissue, is a fertilized egg. It has no protection whatsoever. It's completely dependent on the environment of mom and mother's womb. So if mother is highly toxic with accumulated chemicals over the last 25 years, and then they're eating fruits and vegetables, more chemicals every day, more chemicals, they have less chance of successful implantation because they're highly inflamed already.
Yeah, and the thing is that people are listening. They're like, okay, so I won't eat fruits and vegetables. Or what are you going to eat? Things from packages, right?
Yeah,
so it's very hard for them.
You have to get organic. You have to begin the process of learning how to do organic. You grow some tomatoes on your balcony. You know, you grow mint. You grow parsley. You grow basil. You just grow little things to start with. You make baby steps. And next week or next month, you meet somebody and they've got a friend that's growing organic produce. And you get on the list to get the organic produce. You know, you just begin with little steps. And eventually, you're feeding your family much safer, healthier food.
I always talk here about real food and how people should avoid processed food. This is something I keep saying, you know, lifestyle, sleep, exercise, and stress management, right? And clean food. So
Yes.
it's very hard because in the poorest countries, it seems it's getting worse and worse and worse because wheat products are so cheap. It's cheap. So I was launching this campaign that change a bread for an egg because it was almost the same price some places. And then people are always complaining, but eggs are full of saturated fat because in Brazil still the associations of endocrinologists and cardiologists, they still are afraid of saturated fat and not about sugar and inflammation. And we had so many studies, the Pure study, and so many studies showing that inflammation is the culprit, not the fat itself, right? And people are afraid of eating an egg. Like a pregnant woman is afraid of eating an egg because there's some lady in the internet saying that choline will be bad for you. So we have all this studies showing that there's this recent study published that children born from vegan moms without the proper counseling and stuff like that, they had lots of troubles and neurological problems because of lack of choline in the diet.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to stop breaking up micro and macronutrients. We have to start talking about real food. I think if we go in real food, there's no mistake.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. There are a few people who are, because the bacteria in their gut are not balanced, they have a problem with choline. There are a few people like that, but not that many. It's very, very rare to see someone that has a problem with choline. We have much more problems with processed foods and with accumulated sugar, that we get way too much sugar and blood sugar problems and the chemicals we're exposed to. This is an overwhelming topic. And people who are being introduced to this, if you're hearing me for the first time and all of these concepts are new for you, this is an overwhelming topic. And the key to success is that you just take little baby steps, one step in front of the other. I have an event right now online that we'll talk about, but I interviewed Fran Drescher, the nanny, on American television, very famous actress. And she had uterine cancer 24 years ago. And she asked her oncologist, why did this happen? And the oncologist said, we don't know, it just happens. And she said, well, I didn't want to accept that. So she decided to use her fame not to raise money for cancer research, but rather to raise awareness where cancer comes from. And she formed the group Cancer Schmancer. And she does online education. It's all free, and she's wonderful. And it's the chemicals we're exposed to. It's the inflammation in our body that's the big problem. The things we do that activate our immune system to protect us. Every human activates their immune system when they eat wheat. Without exception, every human. This happens to them. And they don't feel it in their gut, so they think there's no problem. But once again, the ratio is 8-1. And so they'll feel it in their thyroid, or they'll feel it in their joints, or they'll feel it in their reproductive system. They get endometriosis, or they get brain fog, or they get depression, or they get anxiety. Just Google schizophrenia and gluten. Here come the studies. Lots of evidence.
Lots of evidence.
Where psychiatrists are startled, and they write about it in the psychiatry journals. They say, surprisingly, our patient went into complete remission on a gluten-free diet. 1 year later, she still requires no medication. And if she eats wheat, then she goes into relapse and she needs medication again. Just read the science. It's jaw-dropping how much science there is on this.
We have some questions. Not many people speak English, but some do. So they're all excited because they can't leave because they're just listening to you, but they said that they're waiting for the subtitles in Portuguese. So we have here excellent theme, very reliable sources for who doesn't understand. Congratulations. And why is it so difficult to convince people of this? Says Rosimar. They don't want to hear anything that takes away their bread and pasta. They make us look crazy.
That's right. That's right. And if you remember the first few slides that I brought up, is that you don't change a paradigm by convincing the people that don't want to change. Rather, they die. And the younger doctors coming up are learning the truth now. So those doctors come into practice understanding, well, yeah, there is something to this. That's the way you change a paradigm.
If you see the science, the thing is they don't show the science to the students at school, you know. And I know because I was there. I came from there. I was a teacher at university, then I was a preceptor at the residency of internal medicine. You know, and I found out all about this while I was a preceptor at the clinical internal medicine residency, so I could teach my residents about it. Thank God. But afterwards, after I left, and now what I see, unfortunately, is like witch hunt about this. So this is why I invited you, because I mean, you have so much experience about it, and you speak about it like in such a good way. Everyone understands, and you bring the evidence. So I think everyone should listen to this podcast, really, and I hope they do.
You know, I've got 2 books that are in Portuguese now. So you and all the science is there. There's over 300 studies in each of the books. So you can pick up my books and you can start reading about these concepts.
I'm going to put the
with
books
the
here.
Science. Yeah.
I'm going to put both books here, and so you can just click on them and buy them directly in Amazon, and it's in Portuguese. I have my autograph in mine, and also if you want to go to Amazon, in my Instagram, I have this link. So it's like Linktree. You click there and go Amazon, and there you find my books. The books I think are good and are interesting. His book is there. It's in autoimmune disease. So, Como Curar Doenças Autoimunes. What's the other one it's translated already? I only have this one. What's the second one?
You can fix your brain.
Como consertar a sua mente. You can fix your brain. I think I have it in English. It's in Portuguese already, so I'm going to look it up. Because I have only in English. So I'm going to look it up and put it there in Portuguese, because then people buy it more. It's easier for them. And you have lots of projects. So I'd like you to talk about your project. So you teach... right? And you have a very interesting course for practitioners, guys. Like if you're a doctor, a nutritionist, right? If you're curious, I don't know if only doctors and nutritionists can do it. How is it? Tell us.
No, anyone can do it. And it's in the same language that I'm speaking today. I just showed the study, and then how to interpret the study. It's called the Certified Gluten-Free Practitioner Course. And my website is thedr.com, thedoctor.com. Just don't spell the word doctor out, thedr.com. And the course is about 10 hours. And once you register for it, you have 3 months to complete the course. And there are questions after each section, and you can't go to the next section until you answer the questions. And if you get a question wrong, then we say, go back to slide number 241 and then answer the question again. And you go back and say, oh, yeah, okay. And then you answer it again. I don't need you to memorize this. I just need you to be familiar with the concepts. But you will understand this whole world of gluten and wheat-related disorders when you do this course, the CGP course. I call it the CGP course, Certified Gluten Practitioner course. It's the most comprehensive thing I've ever seen for people to get the understanding of why wheat is a problem, and what are toll-like receptors, and what about memory B cells, and some technical things, but explained in everyday language.
And this is really important, because if usually when I see doctors, when they say, oh, gluten is bad for you, and when these other doctors say, why? This is charlatanism, and they don't have the pearls, they don't have the papers, right. You know. So I always have them in my hand. So I look, Alessio said this. Come on, read this, read the science. So I just keep sending papers, you know.
Yes.
But usually, if some people, they need to be in a course, you know, like they have to be taken by the hand, like you do in this CGP course, so they internalize all the information and they feel secure and safe to speak up.
Yes.
Because people are afraid of speaking up, right?
Yes. That's marvelous that you do that.
And what about your series? You have some documentary coming out.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. The Center for Disease Control tells us that 14 of the 15 top causes of death in the world today are chronic inflammatory diseases. It's always inflammation, everything except an unintentional injury, an accident. Everything else is chronic inflammation. Everything. So that's the basic mechanism in the development of all disease. It doesn't matter if it's cancer, autoimmune disease, it doesn't matter what it is. It's always chronic inflammation. And nobody thinks that way. If you reduce the inflammation, you put the disease into remission. And that's why you go gluten-free. You stop throwing petrol on the fire and the inflammation comes down, you feel better. Gluten is a primary fuel for inflammation. So I spent over a year, I started in March of 2023, doing interviews. I went to 7 countries and I interviewed the greats in the field of inflammation and autoimmune diseases, Schoenfeld, Fasano, many greats in the field. And we put this together in a docuseries. It's called The Inflammation Equation, Decoding the Path to Optimal Well-Being. And it's about 45 minutes a day for 9 days. Online, it's all free, and it's at theinflammationequation.com.
Inflammation, and I'm going to write it down here. It's
theinflammationequation.com.
The inflammation equation.com. Can we watch it already? It's already there?
It will launch on May 13th. So if you register now, when you go there and you register, we give you the full interview with Fran Drescher, the nanny.
Wow.
And so you listen to this interview and sometimes you're laughing. You're laughing so hard because she is a comedian. You're laughing so hard your stomach hurts from laughing. And other times you have tears in your eyes.
Oh,
she's very engaging.
I'm gonna watch
it. It's my gift to everyone. Yes. So
I'm putting it here so people can see it. I'm gonna put it in the description, but everyone can already click on it and watch it and subscribe. So 9 chapters, they're gonna change your life. I'm sure. I'm gonna watch them.
Yes. It changes the way you think, and then we tell you what to do. How do you start? For example, indoor air pollution is often much worse than outdoor air pollution. And people don't know this, but your kitchen cabinets, the table next to the bed, the bathroom cabinets, if they're not made out of solid wood, they're made out of press board. And press board is soaked in formaldehyde,
which is neurotoxic.
Outgasses. It's neurotoxic. And you can't smell it, but you're breathing it every day. Or the sheets that you put on top of you when you're sleeping and the blankets, they're soaked in flame retardant chemicals that outgas for years. After 50 washings, they still outgas these chemicals that accumulate in your body over time. And so your indoor air pollution is so bad. Well, we show you the studies. David Furman at Stanford did the studies with NASA, the astronaut organization, with NASA showing that houseplants absorb 74% of the toxins in the air. And if you get 2 6-inch houseplants, just little houseplants, in a 10 by 10 room, you absorb 74% of the toxins in the air. So you put these little house plants in every room of your house, your children's bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom. You have house plants everywhere because they absorb toxins, they make the air cleaner, and you reduce your exposure. So you get glass storage containers instead of Tupperware. And you get stainless steel coffee containers, and you go to the coffee shop and you say, fill it up, please. You don't take their cup. You just learn all these little things that you do to reduce your exposure. That's the purpose of our event. That's why the title is The Inflammation Equation, Decoding the Path to Optimal Well-Being. Because there's so much information, it's overwhelming. So we decode it for you. We show you what the scientists say, what it means, and then what do you do about it?
That's amazing.
And it's all free. It's all free.
That's amazing. Oh my God, this is huge work you did, right? So it has to become a book sometime. Do we have a book coming out?
It will.
Right? Because,
hopefully next year there will be a book on this. For now, we're talking about this event.
Okay, that's great. And I'll make sure everyone knows about it on the 13th of May. I'm going to speak of it on my Instagram. It's in English. Will it have subtitles or not? Not a chance. This is something interesting.
Not yet. I'm looking at putting it in other languages, but that's a tremendous amount of work.
But if you put it on YouTube, it has automatic subtitles. So.
Yeah. Good to know.
Yeah. So our podcast tomorrow, when it comes in the recording of YouTube, it already comes with subtitles, like in 4 or 5 languages. So you put subtitles and you translate to Portuguese, Spanish. So you don't have to spend money on it, You just...
Oh, marvelous.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
You. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but I mean, it's free. It goes in many languages. You don't have to spend a penny, and it goes viral very quickly because YouTube, many people are watching it, So if you want people to know it, it's very good. Like all my podcasts in English, they get translated the day after. It's not automatic. People have to go there and, subtitles and then translate too. Then it comes Portuguese. So they have all the subtitles in Portuguese.
Good to know. Easy. Thank you.
Right? So, what else? Do you have anything you want to say about our main subject or anything you think is relevant?
It's unfortunate that everyone believes that our governments are protecting us from poisons, and they're not. This is all corporate profit. All of the garbage in the food, is all for profit. I mean, Coca-Cola, where they prey on the uneducated people. They bring this stuff to poor countries now, and they make it easy to access, and it's got lots of sugar and lots of chemicals, and people gain weight, they develop obesity, diabetes becomes worse in so many countries, and it's all for profit.
Yeah, but everywhere. Processed food is like that, right? This is everywhere.
That's right. And you have to get smart to protect your family. You have to begin learning little by little the questions to ask of what's safe for you and your children. The only way I think we're going to change the direction the world is going in is by raising a generation of children that think outside the box. They think differently. They need to come up with the answers that we have not come up with to fix the problems on our planet. And children can't do that if they have blood sugar problems and they have obesity and their brains didn't develop properly because mom was high in phthalates during pregnancy. And so it's the little things we do step by step, the baby steps we take that accumulatively will have the result of a brain that works better, a body that works better, less disease, and more joy and happiness.
Oh, thank you so much Professor Tom, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing with us and all my followers and hopefully all Brazil. If you guys help me sharing this around, so each one of you that watch this, please share it with someone you know, okay? And I think it's very important that people see this matter in the evidence-based kind of thinking, right? Not only opinion and speaking out your personal opinion. This is evidence-based, and this is very elegantly put by Dr. Tom O'Brien, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. I always learn when I listen to him speak. And I hope you come back. And I hope you can come sometime in Brazil. We have a conference coming out. Maybe you can come to a conference of ours. You always come to Brazil. We have an Association of Integrative Functional Medicine. It's new. And we're teaching this in a postgrad course. So I'm teaching as well. And all these lectures I told you about are in this post-graduation course. Professor Fasano is coming also. So maybe you can come too and speak to us and record something. Who knows? Right? If
Thank you so much.
Have the time, because I know you're very busy, but we'll talk. Okay?
Yes, look forward to that.
Okay, so thank you very much, and I hope you can come another time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, guys. Vai ficar gravado e aí vocês ativam a legenda, tá, gente? Desculpa se eu falei rápido. A próxima vez eu vou falar mais devagar. Vocês têm razão, eu vi aqui nos comentários. So, good afternoon. Pode terminar.